Hello, my name is Petra. I'm a VP at Google, and also I'm the executive sponsor of Pride at Google, our global network of LGBT plus employees and allies. And as we like to say at Google, we are built for everyone. No matter where you're from, who you are, or who you love, our platforms bring people closer together. And our commitments continue this year, more than ever, as we strive to find ways to come together virtually. And that's why we're so deeply proud of our partnership with organizations such as the Global Equality Caucus and this incredible initiative, Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality. This is a unique forum where lawmakers and citizens come from across the world, and they can come together in a powerful way for us to continue to make the change that we need to see in our communities and in our society. And we do know that the starting point for LGBT plus equality is the law, and that we must keep pushing until equal protections and rights are in place for everyone, regardless of their sexuality, gender identity, or expression. So, on behalf of Google, thank you and welcome. Whether you are just participating, you're contributing, or simply watching these discussions, we're excited to play our small part in making this possible.
In many countries around the world, great progress is being made to improve the lives of gay, lesbian, bi, and trans people. But in too many other countries, this simply isn't the case. And people are facing discrimination, even violence in their lives. We have to change this. But in a world where COVID is keeping us apart, we need to find new ways to come together. That's why the Global Equality Caucus is presenting Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality, so that we can connect civil society, the people who have a voice, with lawmakers and legislators, the people who have a vote. Debate,
connect,
change
for equality.
Welcome to Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality, Europe, part of a series of digital events where elected representatives and civil society discuss equality issues and aim to drive progress in parliaments across the region. My name is Boris Dietrich. I'm a senator from the Netherlands, and I'm your moderator for this event. The Lawmakers for LGBT plus Equality series is presented by the Global Equality Caucus, a network of elected representatives fighting to improve laws for LGBT plus people everywhere. My warmest thanks to Google, who are supporting these events and everything their people have done to enable us to be together today. The Global Equality Caucus is also collaborating with the Victory Institute, who do great work in supporting and training LGBT plus candidates seeking political office. Our partnership ensures that LGBT supportive politicians are resourced from the pipeline during their candidacy and throughout their public careers. The march towards LGBT plus equality continues around the world, and we have seen great progress in Europe, but there is still a lot to be done. Discriminatory laws in many countries continue to put restrictions on the life of LGBT plus people, with many people living in fear of violence and others facing barriers to change their legal gender or marry the person they love. We need to rally lawmakers to challenge these barriers and mobilize change in their parliaments so that LGBT plus people are treated equally under the law. Europe is an incredibly diverse continent, and different countries are at different stages in their treatment of lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender people. Today we will discuss some of these issues. Regrettably, we can't meet in person to explore these issues due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are able to keep the conversation going by digitally connecting legislators, civil society, and you, the public. So please do get involved during the broadcast and use the live chat to engage with other viewers and our participants. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the event. Our first panel discussion will examine current issues in Eastern Europe, where LGBT plus people have uneven protections and are encountering rising violence in countries like Poland and Hungary. We have a fantastic panel of elected representatives to look at the situation. Before the discussion, we have a video message from Bart Staszewski, a Polish LGBT activist and filmmaker. And he will update us on the situation in Eastern Europe and lay out some of the discussion topics for the panel. Thank you and welcome, Bart.
Hello, my name is Bart Staszewski and I am LGBT activist from Poland. I am fighting for equal rights since 8 years. I'm associated with the Love Does Not Exclude Association and Lublin Equality Pride Association. My recent action project, the photo project I made, was to highlight homophobic resolutions that became a daily basis in Poland. 2019, the politicians from the municipalities declared themselves as free from the LGBT ideology. My project was to highlight those homophobic resolutions, and I came into the idea to create a sign that I am hanging, and that is an outcome of those homophobic resolutions, and I make a picture. Suddenly, the whole world attention has been in the eye for those homophobic resolutions, and I pay consequences for it. Behind me, you can see the map of Poland, where we have about 50 such homophobic resolutions, and I have about 20 pending police investigation and 3 lawsuits that I got from the municipalities for defamation of their good name. SLAP, the strategic lawsuits against the public participation, is the daily basis of the LGBT activists in Poland. All of the LGBT activists right now are facing different kind of lawsuits against them. This is our daily basis, and I hope that activists can cooperate with the lawmakers, with the lawyers, to make a new law that will protect the activists from the SLAP, from the different kind of political pressure made by politicians.
Hello and welcome to this panel where we are going to discuss the challenges and issues facing LGBTI people across Eastern Europe. I'm Maja Moracanin from National Assembly of North Macedonia. Recently, in the last few years, we've been seeing progress regarding LGBTI issues in North Macedonia. So I would like to share with you these important things regarding the rights, human rights and freedoms of LGBTI people in North Macedonia. In February 2018, for the first time, we managed to establish the Inter-Party Parliamentary Group for LGBTI Rights in North Macedonia. And also after the election last year, in 2020, we re-established the group again. So currently we have 14 MPs in the assembly who are members of this LGBT group in the parliament. And it is a respectable number because it is actually out of 120 MPs. In the last years, we managed in direct and very close cooperation with civil society to improve the legislative regarding LGBTI issues, but also we took part in the media campaigns for raising the awareness of the citizens about the difficulties, about the violence, hate speech, prejudice on LGBTI people. And also we were part as MPs in the first Pride in 2019 in Skopje. We are very proud also that we recently have passed the bill on protection and prevention from discrimination. And it is very important that in this law, sexual orientation and gender identity are explicitly stated as a basis of discrimination. So also, North Macedonia is now member of the Equal Right Coalition. So these are the good news from North Macedonia, but yes, we are aware that we still have a lot of work ahead regarding LGBTI issues. But however, recently we've seen that in some countries in Eastern Europe, LGBTI people are facing difficulties and even violation of their human rights and freedoms. So on these challenges and issues, we are going to discuss and explore more in this panel discussion. And I'm really delighted to have our respected experts and elected representative Terry Reinke from the European Parliament, and also Krzysztof Smiszek from the Sejma of Poland, and Tomas Raskowicius of Lithuania. Thank you all for being today here with us and joining this panel discussion. And I'll now start directly with the questions for you. So, Krzysztof, Poland was in the news recently, present a lot regarding LGBTI issues. Would you like to share with us what is the current situation in Poland?
Yeah, thank you, Maya, and congratulations with regards to the intergroup, LGBT intergroup in your parliament. I would say that what we are witnessing now in Poland is like two phenomenons. One phenomenon, which is state-sponsored homophobia, state-organized intolerance, state-organized campaign against not only LGBTI people, but also against women's rights. So I would say that homophobia, intolerance, transphobia is kind of official element of official governmental agenda. But on the other side, you have another beautiful phenomenon, which are actions of the civil society, which is growing support of ordinary people, not only LGBT activists or people belonging to the minority groups, but ordinary regular Poles who are witnessing this growing phenomenon of state-organized homophobia, and they say no. They just simply say no to this kind of behavior of the government. I mean, you are totally right saying that Poland, unfortunately, is one of the examples of how hostile the state can be, how intolerant the state can be against its own citizens. What is really, really worrying now in Poland is kind of it's like the actions of not only the government, but also local self-governments, local authorities, which are turning against LGBTI people. And can you imagine that 1/3 of the territory of Poland is covered by local resolutions, local authorities' resolutions, which are called anti-LGBT resolutions. And this is not only a symbolic violence, this is not only a symbolic thing, but this is the symbolic acts, they generate very concrete acts of violence and intolerance against LGBTI minorities.
I would like to ask Thomas now, what is the situation in Lithuania and what is your opinion on the situation of LGBTI people across Eastern Europe?
Thank you very much for having me over here. And to answer your question, I'm very concerned. And I'm very concerned because I think there is a backlash against liberal democracy in general in certain parts of Eastern Europe. Of course, we are having in mind two specific countries, but I think the broader region has to play a role in this. And what happens nationally in each of those countries is very important with regards to the status of democracy as such in Europe. So despite the fact that my country, Lithuania, is in very close proximity to Poland, thankfully, these negative tendencies have not transferred to our national politics yet. But I think we have to be very cautious about it and stand in the safeguard of democracy every single day. When we talk about LGBT human rights situation in Lithuania, so we have been one of the extreme cases being labeled as the most homophobic country in the EU for a quite significant period of time. But I'm very happy to see that the political agenda and social acceptance has been shifting in recent years. And the outcome of the last national election was very promising in this regard. So I am a part of the newly established Liberal Freedom Party, and we established ourselves only in summer 2019. And we managed to win 11 seats in the parliament, which is quite a significant achievement. And we are the only political party which is fully embracing LGBT agenda. And in the following months, in the spring session, we are going to propose the partnership bill. And as we are part of a governing coalition right now, despite the fact that we are the small partner, the governing coalition would fall apart if we are not part of it. And you know that these are the political measures, but we are very hopeful that we will manage to pass this through. And at the moment, there are only 6 countries in the EU that don't have any legal recognition of same-sex families. And I'm really hopeful that in the following months, you will have one less. When we talk about the other pertaining challenges, of course, we are the only country in the EU that has so-called homosexual propaganda legislation in place. We have major challenges pertaining to transgender human rights, also hate crimes and hate speech is a big problem, but you know, slowly but surely. So the progress is in the horizon yet. But what I'm coming back, what I have started with, so we really have to safeguard the health of democracy in Eastern Europe. And I think the LGBT rights has become a specific litmus test for the general quality of democracy in each country. So I hope that we will manage to stand strong in this regard.
Thank you, Thomas. And now I'll go to Terry, because Terry, as you know, she's president of the intergroup on LGBTI rights in the European Parliament. So Terry, you actually have a view on the overall picture of LGBTI issues in EU, but also in Eastern Europe. So also, I would like to ask you, what is the role of the EU regarding the issues facing LGBTI people? How can EU actually help to improve this situation?
Thanks a lot, Maya, and thanks a lot for organizing this. I'm very excited to be here. And let me maybe start by saying I think that we can see these specific phenomena that Christoph and Thomas have now described mostly and maybe more far-reached in Eastern European countries. But I would say, for example, this attack on liberal democracies, this attack on fundamental rights, this is happening all across Europe. And it's basically, well, maybe also all across the world. So I think it's a challenge that we commonly face. And I can only support the analysis that it's a very ambiguous picture, because I think we have a lot to celebrate over the past years, but we also had a lot of things that are of great concern and that we need to look at. Now, what we are doing inside of the European Parliament, I would say we always have a twofold strategy. So we are trying to, on the one hand, push for legislative changes. Most notably now, we have the LGBTI strategy, which I think will give us a good basis to move from, to work on mutual recognition of documents across the European Union, to go against hate crime, hate speech, but also in external relations, and also for North Macedonia, very importantly, accession processes to highlight LGBTI issues. But at the same time, with these legislative changes, we also want to see the Commission actually enforcing existing legislation. And I think most notably with regards to Poland, we would like to see infringement procedures when it comes to attack on LGBTI rights, because we believe the Commission has been too reluctant over the past months and years to stand up for EU citizens' fundamental rights. And this is what the intergroup in the European Parliament has been pushing for. But I also want to mention the other part, and I think that also Christoph and Tomasz have already highlighted this. We really try to work closely with the community on the ground, because I completely agree. If we want to change the political atmosphere, we need to have the citizens' movement that are behind us. We have big movements also all across Eastern Europe. And I think that from the side of the Parliament, we will only be successful when we work very closely together with them, when they are successful. And this is why we are trying to always include the community and to support them as much as we can. And I think that this has really been the strategy that has brought us forward over the past years.
Thank you, Terry. I completely agree, and I think that I'm actually convinced that without strong cooperation and close work with the civil society and with the LGBT community, we couldn't have made this progress in the last year. Thanks. And now I would like to ask you all. We'll start with Christoph again. What are your priorities at this moment? What are you expecting to do in order to improve the situation regarding LGBTI?
Well, it is very hard to talk about priorities in terms of legislation under such homophobic circumstances. However, what we decided, because we also established an LGBT intergroup, first in Polish parliament history, and this brings a lot of together a lot of MPs from different parties. So we are actually preparing ourselves for election 2023, and we want to be prepared in terms of draft laws that we want to present when we are finally in power. So we are doing a lot of stuff. First of all, we are submitting draft laws on different issues. So the marriage equality, registered partnership, rights of trans people, as well as legislation on hate crimes and hate speech. We already submitted those draft laws to the parliament because we want to force the parliament to hold a debate. And we know the debate will be hostile. We know the debate will be awful. However, this kind of maintaining of this issue in the public sphere, we are sure that it will bring, it will put some light on the issue, but also it will stimulate people's opinions. So these are our priorities. But also what we do in the parliament, we try to create sort of safe space for those who are who wants to take part in the public debate. So we invite LGBT NGOs to the parliament, even if it's not a very friendly building now. But we invite those people, these activists, to the parliament, and we hold a debate. So the majority, which is not very friendly, I would say, or the majority which is hostile, they are forced see us, to hear us, to see that we are not giving up. So they are not going to be successful in their thinking that they will sweep under the carpet all those important issues. So creating a safe space, but also maintaining a debate, legislative debate, in the very hostile circumstances.
Thank you, Christoph. And Thomas, what are your priorities? What is currently the work? Your part of the work in the Parliament, in the Seimas?
Thank you for sharing, especially for Christoph, for the strategies that you do. I think this is very important, and please keep up doing the good job. And in our regard, at the moment, we are focusing very strongly on the partnership bill. We have drafted the piece of legislation already. Now we are negotiating it with all political groups within the parliament, looking for the specific compromises if needed. And it's quite an intense political process. Also, we try to have a very constructive conversation with the society, because there are for sure certain groups and certain organizations who want to scandalize or galvanize people around this. So I think it's very important to talk in the matter of facts and constructive arguments, and do not submerge into the emotions. But I think this is a very needed conversation, because it helps us to define what kind of society we are and what kind of society we want to be. So I think LGBT human rights is a good excuse for the general dialogue in the society. And, especially from the countries in the Eastern Europe, which have gone through the totalitarian regimes for the bigger part of the recent modern history, I think that is a very needed conversation, and it has to happen sooner or later. So now our priority, I would say, is to engage into that conversation and to make sure that the country and the Europe works for everyone.
Thank you, Thomas. And Terry, please share with us your current priorities in the European Parliament and in EU in general.
Well, first of all, let me share there was a very important and historic moment for us as LGBTI intergroup in the European Parliament. As you know, we are the biggest and I would say best intergroup in the Parliament already now. But we now had a moment where for the first time we had open members from all member states inside of the European Union. And I think that we have really been trying over the past years also to attract more people, especially from Eastern Europe, to the intergroup. And that has been a very successful endeavor. And now we are much broader and more representative than we were, for example, in the last legislature. And I think that that's a great step. I have already mentioned 2 points that are important for us that are part of the LGBTI strategy. The first one is mutual recognition of documents, for example, birth certificates, adoption certificates, but also marriage certificates, for example. As you know, a lot of same-sex couples, a lot of rainbow families still face when they're moving to other EU countries that they're basically losing their legal status. We believe that this is really restricting freedom of movement of rainbow families and LGBTI people inside of the EU. So we want to change that. And the second point is very importantly to do something against hate crimes and hate speech. There we are also closely following. I think this would also make a very big difference for a lot of countries in Eastern Europe, most notably also Poland. So we are very closely working on that. Additionally, a wide range of other topics, ban on conversion therapies, which has been an important issue for us, intersex and trans rights, legal gender recognition. But what we are also trying to do, maybe more procedurally, to get in contact closer with national intergroups in national parliaments, like, for example, the one that Christoph mentioned in Poland, but also obviously yours in North Macedonia, because we think that working on all different levels together is actually very, very important. And we also want to encourage in other national parliaments, parliamentarians to form intergroups on LGBTI issues. Obviously, this summer, if it's going to be possible, we want to join as many prides as possible. We hope that maybe we can meet on the street also. Let's see how much is going to be possible. And then one thing that I think is important, and we are planning now in the intergroup to do something which I believe is a symbolic act, but still it is important in the coming weeks to declare the European Union to an LGBTI freedom zone, because we have seen that people are trying to attack these fundamental rights. And we want to be clear that, yes, the situation is not as it should be right now, but our promise and our pledge as parliamentarians in the European Parliament is to fight for a European Union where everybody can live exactly how they want to.
Thank you, Terry. And at last, just very briefly, because I would like to stay in this positive mood, and just very briefly, because I've shared earlier the progress what have been made in North Macedonia, and I'm convinced that despite all these challenges and backlash and so on, there are some positive developments in Eastern Europe. Just very briefly, what would you like to share with us, and to like a good news which can give us hope and more strength in continuing our fight for LGBTI rights and freedom. Christoph?
Yes, very briefly, I think that the most interesting and optimistic thing is that is the growing support for LGBTI cause in Poland. And I mean, you can see it every day, but also every year. Our LGBTI prides are bigger and bigger every year. So I remember 20 years ago when I took part in my first gay pride in Warsaw, it was like 50 people, 60 people. Now you have 80,000. So this says something, yeah, that the progress is being made, and sometimes the government, the authorities are totally not in line with the atmosphere and with the mood and the acceptance of the society. So I'm very, very much optimistic, even if the circumstances are horrible.
Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. And thank you all to our respected panelists that joined us together on this panel discussion. And we wish you all the best in continuing your great work you are doing regarding LGBTI issues and pushing for equality. And we look forward to seeing progress in the region of Eastern Europe. And I really think that these issues that we have raised today on this panel discussion will be very important, and they will contribute to very soon seeing all of us progress regarding LGBT issues in Eastern Europe. So thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.
Following on from that insightful discussion, we now have a message from our friend in Estonia, Aili. Aili is an activist and is the president of the Estonian LGBT Association, who do great work in education and in advancing LGBT rights in Estonia.
Hello, my name is Aili. I'm from Estonia, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Estonian LGBT Association. We are a national CSO working for LGBTI people in Estonia. Our mission is to work towards equal opportunities for LGBTI people and to support them and their loved ones. 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, share a similar geographic location, a shared history, and common ambitions for the progress of human rights. Our journeys towards acceptance of European values may have been different, yet our challenges are often similar. Progress on the human rights of LGBTI people has been slow, if not regressing. There are many aspects that need significant improvement. Last few years, the Baltic countries have been home to a stark rise in hate speech and hostility towards LGBTI people. Our organization has never experienced so many threats and attacks in our 12-year history. But at the same time, more and more people are realizing the extent of this issue, and our support and visibility is growing. Overall, the values-based adoption of human rights is facing serious challenges politically and socially, and this is strongly affecting the lives of LGBTI people and the safety of human rights organizations. Now, as always, we must ask ourselves how we can ensure that all European countries share an understanding of universal human rights, how we can work together towards recognizing them, and how we can ensure that LGBTI people are safe across Europe.
Thank you, Aili, for your message. We now have a very special guest interview with Helena Dalli, who is the European Commissioner for Equality. Here's what happened when I spoke with the Commissioner a few weeks ago.
So hello, Mrs. Dalli. Good to have you in our program.
Hello, Senator, and thank you for this conversation.
Well, let me first introduce you to all the viewers, and then because we don't have so much time, I will just start firing the first question. But you have been the first ever dedicated European Commissioner for Equality, and you are serving since last year, December 2019, as Equalities Commissioner, and you have overseen the first European Union's LGBTIQ strategy for the years 2020-2025. And before that, you were a member of the Parliament of Malta, where I met you, by the way, a few years ago, but you have been a member of Parliament for 23 years. And the last 2 years, you've also been a minister for the Maltese government. My first question is actually a congratulations about your publishing the EU's first dedicated LGBTIQ equality strategy. You published it in November of 2020. And it's about legal stuff, it's about policies, but my question is, what difference do you hope it will make in ordinary people's lives?
Well, the fact that it's the first ever LGBTIQ equality coming from the EU Commission is already a game changer. And through this strategy, we are making clear the Commission's intention of stepping up the work for LGBTIQ equality across the EU and in the world, with clear legislative policy and funding measures. So the actions focus around the four main pillars: tackling discrimination, ensuring safety, building inclusive societies, and leading the call for LGBTIQ equality around the world. So, amongst other things, we call on all EU member states to address LGBTIQ equality at the national level as a priority, and therefore adopt a national LGBTIQ equality strategy. So, in this process, resources are being made available so that we support member states in the best way possible.
When you read the strategy, you see it's about a lot of topics, for instance, employment, but also homelessness. It's about education, culture, and sports. What do you think is one of the most important topics the strategy plan is tackling?
Well, I think we must look at the strategy comprehensively. The fact that we have the strategy and that member states are speaking about it will definitely bring about a positive change in people's lives, in LGBTIQ people's lives. And the fact that the European Commission is speaking about this, I think, makes a lot of difference. And it's very difficult for me to say what is most important, because if it's not important, I don't think it would be in the strategy. So really, it's a comprehensive document, which and which we put in a lot of experiences, a lot of research, and the main aim is to bring about a difference in people's lives, so that they can live their lives better. And also there's the international dimension as well. So I hope that this will be a force of good, not only in the European Union but around the world.
Yes. You launched the strategy plan in November 2020. Did you receive responses from member states that they said, for instance, okay, we need to step up, we are going to do this or that?
Yes, the response has been good overall, and the European Parliament and European LGBTIQ umbrella organizations, they welcomed the strategy and had words of praise for its content and the robustness of the language used. And member states too welcomed the strategy, not least because several of them have been calling for it for several years. Incidentally, while an equality minister in 2018, I had led a member state's call on an LGBTIQ strategy that was signed by a total of 19 member states. Little did I know then that I would have to be the one to deliver on that call just 2 years later.
And let's take the issue of rainbow families, for instance, when they want to travel with their children within the European Union. Sometimes their legal relation to the child has not been recognized in some EU countries, so it causes a lot of problems. What, as EU Commissioner, can you do about those kind of issues?
Yes, in fact, in the strategy, we refer to legislation whereby rainbow families will be recognized in all member states. As the President said in her State of the Union address, a family is in one member state is a family in all member states. So even though the particular member state might not have the legislation to recognize these, that we shall have now a legislation whereby rainbow families are recognized in all member states.
May I ask you about a country, for instance, that really needs to step up, like Poland, for instance? Many LGBTIQ people within all of Europe were actually appalled by let's say, the gay-free zones issue that was proclamated there. What can you do as European Commission and as Commissioner in order to stimulate the Polish government to, fight for equality?
We cannot write off certain zones or regions in the European Union as LGBTIQ phobic and look elsewhere. We instead need to engage more than ever to extinguish this flame of discrimination and hate. So really, we have been looking at what is happening, and I don't think that this is a question of geography, because it can happen anywhere. And of course, we have limitations into how much as a Commission we can do. But we, for instance, are seeing that where there are these kind of problems, where these values, these European values, are being cast aside, we are looking even, for instance, at funding of projects. The European Union cannot be party to funding projects whereby its values are not being upheld. So we are hoping that we we will continue to engage with these member states. But in the meantime, we are seeing what we can do, and within our limitations, within our competences, we shall continue striving to convince that this is not the way to go.
Now, you are talking with me, and I'm representing the Global Equality Caucus, and our members are members of parliament. So you're actually an expert, because before you were a commissioner for 23 years, you have been a member of parliament in Malta. What do you think legislators across Europe can do to push forward equality in the way you have done so successfully in Malta and in Europe?
Well, I think first of all, politicians must knock on doors and go into homes and listen to families and listen to their stories. And in that way, they will realize how much, as politicians, as representatives of these people, how much they more needs to be done, because society is not homogeneous. Not everybody is the same, and you may enact a legislation whereby you affect the lives in a mainstream way, but then there are specific groups in societies which you have to address. And this is what you learn as a parliamentarian, as a representative of citizens. When you listen to their particular stories. For instance, I can mention one example of the tragedy in a particular family, which I remember very clearly and which spurred me to work in the area of trans rights. For instance, when you listen to a family telling you that they have a daughter who is suicidal, who would not go out for fear of needing to show her identification card or her passport, which does not relate to what you can see physically, because she's a boy, but physically you see a girl, probably, but she was born a boy, and then you say, but we must legislate so that the documentation, the government documentation, would be in relation to the gender which this person identifies in, and that makes her life much easier, because and it has changed the life of many trans people who I know and who had no desire to undergo gender reassignment surgery. All they wanted was for their documentation to reflect how they identify themselves. And we could do family, it's the friends who never see this person a happy person, or a person who is thriving and using her or his talents. But now they can do this, and I'm not saying that we solved all the problems of trans people, but it has definitely helped.
Well, let me ask you my last question. Based on your rich experience as LGBTI member of parliament, what is actually, let's say, your proudest political achievement in all those years that you have been fighting for LGBTIQ rights?
My proud moments are when I know that I have made a difference. When I know that a family now is here because their child can live his or her life freely, and that he or she can use their full potential, and that they are not discriminated against. And that is what makes me happy. That it was, because as politicians we can talk a lot, but when it actually comes to changing things which will affect people's lives, then we have to really work hard. And this is when I look and speak and get feedback from these people and from families, that is when I say, okay, I am doing the right thing, and it's a very good feeling that you are helping others to live full lives, to be included in society, and not to feel as outcasts. As I said in the beginning, we don't choose how we are born, so nobody must be discriminated against. Of course, there are people who do not agree with me, and I know that I have enemies, but then again, people who don't have enemies are the people who have never tried to change things.
Thank you so much. It has been very inspirational listening to you. I wish you all the best in the years to come with this strategy plan. Thank you so much for wanting to take time for the Global Equality Caucus. We can learn so much from you, and of course we will follow all the progress you are making in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator, and I look forward to other conversations because I am sure that we are on the same page and that together we can bring about change to make people's lives better. Thank you.
We are very grateful for Helena Dalli, for the Commissioner, for the time she spent with us. As the Commissioner just discussed, she was a driving force in Malta's comprehensive equalities bill, which serves as a benchmark throughout Europe. To achieve this change, it was important for Commissioner Dalli to create alliances across ideological divides to ensure political agreement going forward. This leads us into our next panel discussion, which will look at how we can build political alliances across Europe to achieve lasting change. It's often the case that equality legislation stalls because political parties just cannot agree on what the law should look like. In places where equality has been won, lawmakers have worked together across the political spectrum, where compromise has forged enduring consensus and stability. I myself am not a stranger to compromises and coalitions, being from the Netherlands, and I will be moderating the panel discussion. Before I introduce you to the panelists, we have a message from Antonio Mijahlov. He's a rights activist from North Macedonia, and he's the director of the Subversive Front, which does vital policy and advocacy work to build agreement on sexual and gender minority rights in his country. Welcome, Antonio.
Hello, my name is Antonio Mijahlov. I'm the Executive Director of Subversive Front, that's a sexual and gender minorities association from Skopje, from North Macedonia. We are a community-engaged organization that aims to promote justice, equality, and freedom for the members of the sexual and gender minorities in North Macedonia through the principles of accountability, solidarity, and inclusivity. Our key strategic areas are research and generation of evidence on the issues and the needs of sexual and gender minorities, then advocacy and policy influence on the human rights and the status of sexual and gender minorities in North Macedonia, as well as community development of sexual and gender minorities community members in the country. Empathy is the key element of building alliances of solidarity in a society. Laws and policies reflect the existing norms and values in a society, and therefore it is crucial to combat stereotypes and prejudices that against LGBT people that politicians have. As stereotypes and prejudices are based and built up on emotions or affects, we personally connect politicians and decision makers with ordinary LGBTI people so that they can develop empathy towards the particular challenges and issues these people have, and then take an action to resolve them. One example of this is the establishment of inter-party parliamentary group for advancing the human rights of LGBTI people in North Macedonia. It currently has 15 MPs as members who come from political parties with different political ideology. A question to the lawmakers would be how we can establish political alliances not only across sexual orientation or gender identity, but also across nation, ethnicity, different culture, different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, and so on. In particular, having in mind when we have the context of the Balkans, when these issues are really important to address. Thank you.
We have a panel discussion on building political alliances, and we have a few wonderful panelists. Let me introduce you to them. The first one is Arnett Tretter-Bartstuen, a representative from Norway, and she was first elected in 2005 and the only openly lesbian politician in her parliament. We have Jerry Buttimer, a member of the Senate of Ireland, who was the leader of the Senate for 4 years and is also the chair of his party's LGBT group. And we have Nancy Kelly, the chief executive of the UK-based LGBT charity Stonewall. Welcome, everybody, to our panel discussion, and let's get the ball rolling. Jerry, may I start with you? What are your personal experiences of building partnerships and alliances across party lines when moving LGBT issues forward?
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me on today. That is the most important question that all of us as people who are advocates of LGBT and human rights will ever answer, because it is about persuading people and it's about building relationships and campaigns. And for me, as part of our marriage equality journey, but also as part of the Gender Recognition Act that we passed in 2015, it was about reaching out. It was about persuading a coalition of people. And as politicians, we're used to asking people for votes. But in this case, we had to go out into the community as a referendum to ask people for permission to lend us their vote to pass, first of all, a referendum, but then secondly, to bring a legislation through Parliament. But in terms of marriage equality, it is about the rights of a minority being given permission by the majority. So we had to build a strong coalition of a wide variety of people. And I would have the view, no matter where we are or who we are, that we must forge alliances to bring people with us, to move people in our direction. And that mightn't always be popular. And in our case in Ireland, it was a very incremental journey, beginning with civil partnership. But key to that, to me, was the work of the NGOs, the work of different advocacy groups, but more importantly, and here's where I think we can learn from our marriage equality referendum, is it was the telling of stories, the personal, the power of the story, the power of the individual, persuading the collective. And that's, for me, it was the most takeaway moment, was the experience of being able to bring people with us. So yes, we must have a strong campaign driven by us, whether we're politicians or by advocacy groups or by activists, but the centre must hold in bringing people together so that we can carry the majority. And I think the experience that we had in Ireland, beginning with what was a constitutional convention, where 100 citizens, elected and non-elected, gathered, and we might come back to that later on, began...
Yes, let's go back to that a little bit later, because I would like to know from Annette, in Norway, was your experience different?
Well, as you said, I was elected in 2005, and one of the things we started working on when we formed the government, in a Labour Party government in 2005, was to prepare the equal marriage law. And at that time, we had a coalition government consisting of the Labour Party, the Socialist Left Party, and the Centre Party, which actually more conservative, and they opposed this law. So we were in majority, but in this case, we knew that we had to go to the other parties, the opposition in Parliament, to collect the needed votes. I think we needed about 12 extra votes or something in Parliament outside the government, because of the Centre Party that didn't want to vote for it. And that was an interesting experience, because then we had to go to the more progressive MPs on the right wing in Parliament. And of course, at that time, we also had a few open LGBT members of the Progress Party and the Conservative Party, and we used those to target their parties. And our main goal was to let those parties agree on letting their MPs free, so they could vote what they wanted to, and not what the party actually meant. And I think that was a really interesting experience, because we worked together, all the openly LGBT representatives, as a team. Regardless of political views in other cases and ideologies, we really worked as a team together with the civil society and the NGOs. So I experienced, having a pep talk with an MP from the Conservative Party, them helping me preparing arguments and etc. And I think that that also paid off, because we won the vote, and the equal marriage law was passed, and we have continued that work actually on between the party lines, MP to MP.
Let's talk about that a little bit later, because I would like to know from Nancy, from a civil society perspective, how important is it to build coalitions of support to achieve change, and how did Stonewall manage to do that?
So, I mean, building on what Annette and Jerry have said, it's completely essential. And I think, when I think about the campaigns that we are involved in, as well as ones that we've been involved in historically, that process of building a really strong partnership that crosses parliamentarians from all parties, kind of civil society leadership, community and individual leadership, but also often in the UK, increasingly kind of hero corporations. I think the kind of role of advocacy by corporates is increasingly important in LGBTI rights internationally. So kind of that broad coalition of support is completely essential. And if I think about the work that we're doing in the goal to end conversion therapy in the UK, we've really managed to build an enormous amount of support within Parliament across all of the parties, a huge support for an effective ban. We have kind of a very large coalition of civil society actors in the ban conversion therapy group. We're also supported by the MOU group, so all of the Royal Colleges of Psychiatry, Psychology, the kind of medical bodies. So I think building those very kind of broad-based partnerships around a kind of clear, compelling, positive narrative for change is absolutely part of the picture, and kind of having a step strategy. I think the only thing that I would really then add to what Annette and Jerry are pointing to is, I think in a lot of kind of campaigns for LGBTI inclusion, we can get all of those things right. We can have a great partnership, we can have a great strategy, but quite often you need a catalyst. You need something that just unlocks the potential for change. That can sometimes be kind of high profile media stories. It can be just a slight change in government. It can sometimes be the injection of a kind of a really critical piece of evidence. But I think as well as that incremental build of partnership and strategy, I think we also have to be really tactical and looking out for what is the catalyst that opens the door to accelerate change. And that's something we're really mindful of when we're doing our work.
Thank you so much. Jerry, how important is it, for instance, to get the center-right political parties on board in order to achieve LGBT equality?
I think it's very important. And I think what everybody has said so far resonates with all of us. But it is about the center-right. It is about the center, not just being the lead, but participating. And
But does that need a specific strategy to get them on board?
I think it needs a couple of things. First of all, language is important. And Nancy is right. Visibility of key personnel is critical. And I might be unpopular for saying this, but in our case, Fine Gael is part of the EPP. It's a Christian right. The Tory party in England, the Republican Party in America. We shouldn't be afraid to build allies and alliances with what are considered non-LGBT, friendly groups, if you like. I don't mean that to sound the way it sounds, but we must build new alliances and forge new relationships, because as we see across the world, the landscape is not pretty in some places. But what we must do, and what we must, I think, strive to ensure, is language, visibility, and constantly with like-minded groups challenging each other to be that catalyst, to be that voice, and also to recognize that we can persuade people in other political parties, with other political ideologies, to move forward. And the one thing that I found with our referendum, and I think if you look at the Channel 4 It's a Sin series, it does, language, visibility has an impact. And it does galvanize the minds of older generation and of people who perhaps would not necessarily be in the vanguard of change. And I think that in our case, our personal story, and just giving the anecdotal evidence from It's a Sin, which I'm sure we've all watched, it's crystallized minds, and particularly around older people who are saying, was my son or daughter, or my son rather in this case, subjected to that type of behavior by their generations in terms of the attitude to HIV/AIDS. So
Okay.
I think it's a combination of that, plus us being willing to embrace on new challenges and new horizons.
Thank you so much. And Anand, as a legislator, what do you actually need from civil society in order to push for LGBT equality?
I'm really in Norway. We have excellent NGOs working for human rights in general and LGBT plus questions in special. And I think they are, of course, in Norway we have a really solid NGO framework. They are well funded by the government, and they are not left to protest on the result of things. They are included in every process, and that's the Norwegian model are working very well. So they also feel much included, and they are strong, and they are able to do their work. But it's totally necessary for me, because they are the ones having the knowledge. They are updated on what's happening around, and they also have the arguments, and they have the network. And that's crucial for me to be able to do my work. So I'm doing it for them, and we work together as a team all the way, and they update me, and that's what I need to be able to do my work. And I think it's interesting what you said about the conversion therapy case, Nancy. We are struggling with that in Parliament right now, and I see that the coalition we made from passing the equal marriage law, it's still on, because we see that we have MPs from every party now wanting to put forward a law like that. So I think we will be able to pass a law during the next year, actually. But I also wanted to say something about what Jerry said. I think it's absolutely crucial that we are able to, both as MPs, but also to teach the NGOs that, being an LGBT activist is often said to be kind of a lefty thing, and people don't want to address the more conservative parties, the right-wing parties. That must stop. We need to, accept the ground facts and try to work with what we have. And that's something that the Norwegian LGBT NGOs really did. So, and they managed to build partnerships and trust with these parties. And with that also comes knowledge and change.
Okay, thank you. But Nancy, I would like to ask you, Annette said we have to be careful that it's not only a leftish issue, but what can be done to stop LGBT issues and identity politics becoming some kind of cultural dividing line, which polarizes the left and the right, because that might not help the case. So what's your view on that?
It's a big question. So just to kind of reinforce a couple of things that Jerry and Anna had said, I think that our model always at Stonewall is to work with people on a cross-party basis. And some of that is about adjusting your story. So conservative politicians in the UK are much more moved by kind of personal freedom narratives and also by family-oriented narratives, while LGBTQ people want freedoms and have families and are part of families. And so I think it's really important that we talk in a way that kind of that is compelling for different audiences. I think also it's probably really worth noting that that the Conservative Party in particular maybe doesn't look the way that it used to in the UK. There are an enormous number of LGBT, or LGB parliamentarians in the UK Conservative Party, not least with the new intake. So that creates a whole different dynamic. I think the piece about culture war is really, really interesting, and colleagues will be aware that we've got a particular issue around institutionalised transphobia in our media and to a degree our politics in the UK that really falls into that kind of culture war divide, whereas issues for LGBT people are much less kind of mobilised in that culture war way. I think that there's a couple of things for me. It's important that we don't fight a culture war. So LGBT rights are not intrinsically left-wing issues, whatever the politics of people who work in LGBT advocacy organisations. They are matters of human dignity, human freedom, human flourishing. You know, we can all come together around those issues. I think that where there is a concerted, so I guess I'm saying we shouldn't start culture wars, right? Be very careful not to start them. And I think that where others are really motivated to use LGBT rights, essentially to kind of throw red meat to particular parts of their supporter base or to kind of stoke up distractions, I think it's really just important to be thoughtful about how you engage. And I wouldn't say that Stonewall always gets this right. I really wish we did. But we think a lot about how can we keep talking about the positive vision? How can we have a communication that is hope-based? How can we avoid getting constantly sucked into these very inflammatory, harmful, and ultimately kind of distracting kind of culture war media stories? And I think that is really difficult for people who really care about LGBT rights, but really essential. How can we keep telling that positive story of a future that everybody can buy into, and avoid going down these rabbit holes of kind of fighting around inclusive language or woke politics gone mad?
Nancy, how important is it to have role models as politicians? For instance, Annette and Jerry are role models, being active legislators. Is it more important to have legislators as role models, or should it be people from civil society, for instance?
I think we need all walks of society. We need role models, right? It's that great thing. You can't be what you can't see. And I think that for new generations of LGBTQ plus people, being able to look to the generations that have come before them and see a whole range of fantastic paths before them is really important. I know that within NGOs, people have that same feeling. I think there's particularly an issue around LGBTQ legislator visibility that is incredibly powerful. And it's powerful partly symbolically, in terms of the wider movement being able to feel we have a kind of affinity, we have, you know, we share an experience, we are a we. I think that can help forge much closer relationships between legislators and NGOs, which then can drive real change. It's also really important about moderation of peer behaviour. So sometimes I think that one of the things that would do the best for trans rights in the UK right now is to elect a couple of trans MPs. Because certainly I know that the presence of our LGB MPs within our parliament and our LGB members of the Lords really has shifted the kind of dial on acceptable conversations in those institutions as workplaces, actually. So I think there are a couple of really key ways in which having LGBTQ people visible as legislators makes a really big difference, on top of how important it is for there to be role models across every sector, really.
Oh, thank you so much. My last question is to Annette and to Jerry. Please be brief in your answer, but I would like to know, do you think there is a role for LGBT caucuses in national parliaments?
Yeah, I can start. I experienced that different parliaments in different countries have different traditions when it comes to this. In Norway, we don't have a huge tradition having those caucuses. Actually, we only have a few, and they're not officially connected to parliament, but it's something that the MPs do on their own. We don't have a LGBT caucus in parliament, but we have a human rights caucus in parliament, which, of course, it works a lot with LGBT rights. But I think the main and the most important groups when it comes to political groups is the LGBT groups in the parties. Actually, they play a really huge role. Not the caucus in parliament, but as I said, we don't have that tradition, but I admire other parliaments who actually have these caucuses and uses them actively. And I would wish for Norway to have that, but it's not in our tradition. But
maybe you can start one and start a new tradition.
Yeah, but traditions, they develop quite not fast in parliament. But it's for me, for example, to be able to reach out to a fellow MP in other countries to discuss these issues. It's highly important that I can go and see. Yeah, they have a caucus, and I can use that as a ground for having contact.
And that's why we have the Global Equality Caucus, where we
and that's really, really, really helpful and good. Yeah.
Great, Jerry. Last word to you.
Yeah, I think it's very important. That's why we were fortunate here in Ireland to be able to last year establish an LGBT caucus because it is about visibility in the workplace, and it's for members of staff and parliamentarians to collectively work to promote, to advocate, and to achieve success. And I think what Nancy made the point about visibility is important. And we do need role models, whether it's in sport or politics, but equally, it's a coordinated approach, a synergy between everybody, and it's not how you win. It's not how you win is not so important. It's the way you win our battles, and I think it's important that we work together. And we have an old Irish saying, "Ninart le cor le céile," which means unity is strength. And we've so much to offer as a collective that it's important that we, I think, continue what we're doing here with the Global Equality Network to ensure that we can promote and achieve success around the world.
Thanks so much, all of you. That's all we have. There's no more time, but thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, and good luck with your work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Now, I'm delighted to say we have a special message of support from Leo Varadkar. And Leo was the leader of Ireland between 2017 and 2020. And currently he serves as Deputy Prime Minister, or Tánaiste. Mr. Varadkar was Ireland's first openly gay head of government and is one of only 5 openly LGBT people globally to have served as their country's leader. Welcome, Leo. Let's hear your message.
Hi, Leo Varadkar here. I'm Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. I'm really pleased to support the Global Equality Caucus, which I know is doing some really important work all over the world. Parliamentarians play a vital role in driving progress towards equality and improving people's lives for the better. We have the power to form governments, pass laws, fund important policies and programmes, and influence national debates. However, I don't like the idea of us being seen as role models or setting an example for others. I think we all have too many flaws for that accolade. But I do think getting elected to Parliament or to your local council if you're LGBT or from a minority is as much about normalisation and acceptance as anything else. People seeing beyond your minority status. It also encourages acceptance among others and signals to people who are not out that they will be accepted by their communities in the main. There is less to fear when gay people get elected to public office. And I think the same must have been true when America elected its first Catholic president or when countries elect their first female prime minister. It's a reflection of social changes that have happened already, as much as change itself. My country, Ireland, has made a lot of progress in recent years. We were the first country to vote for marriage equality by a popular vote. Most of us hoped that a referendum wouldn't be necessary, that we could pass a law through our parliament like other countries did, but our constitution required a referendum, a vote of the public. At the start, some of us feared that it would be divisive or that it could even be defeated. On the contrary, it turned out to be a really positive experience. The referendum engaged the entire country in debate. People who were gay told their families and friends for the first time. Thousands knocked on their neighbours' doors asking them to vote yes. And it was as though the whole nation came out and spoke with one voice. The result was remarkable. The vote passed in all but one county, in rural areas as well as urban ones. And that was unexpected and showed that the country was more united than we believed it was. We didn't have red states and blue states, just one Ireland going green for yes. The result also spurred an international response. If a traditionally conservative Catholic country could do this, then why couldn't they? Australia followed with a referendum, Germany with a positive parliamentary vote, and eventually the House of Commons in Westminster decided that Northern Ireland should have marriage equality as well, where it had been blocked there by one of the parties. It also opened the door to other reforms, like the recognition of transgender people using a self-identification model, the repeal of the constitutional ban on abortion, the world's first LGBT youth strategy, gender pay gap legislation, a new sexual health strategy, including a state-funded PrEP programme. It doesn't mean that the job is done in Ireland, of course. Transgender people still face huge discrimination and struggle to access appropriate healthcare. HIV testing and PrEP programmes are not as widely available as they should be. Homophobic bullying in schools and mental health issues, unfortunately, remain. These are ongoing issues which I, as Deputy Prime Minister and a Government Minister, will continue to work on to improve. I am, of course, very concerned about LGBT rights in the rest of the world, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, where opposition to equality for gay people has become an electorally popular stance for some. So we must continue to unite and show solidarity to people in all parts of the world. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today, and I wish the Global Equality Caucus every success in your mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Leo for that brilliant message of support and for all you have done and continue to do for Ireland and Europe. We now have another exclusive interview with another inspirational leader. I'm very happy to introduce to you Petra de Sutter, who was recently appointed a Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium, making her the most senior transgender politician in Europe and in the world. Here's what I discussed with Petra when we spoke recently. Hello, I'm here with Petra de Sutter. She's the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium and also serves as her country's Minister of Civil Service, Public Enterprises, Telecommunications, Post Services. Petra was appointed as Deputy Prime Minister in October 2020, making her the first openly transgender minister and the most senior trans politician in the whole world. Before joining the Belgian government, she was a member of the European Parliament in 2019, 2020, and a member of the Belgian Senate from 2014 until 2019. But Petra is also a professor of gynecology and has advocated for improved sexual and reproductive rights in Europe, and has also supported the rights of LGBTI people and measures to protect our environment. Welcome, Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Boris. I'm very happy to be with you, and you could have shortened the introduction a little bit.
No, because I want the whole world to know how important you are.
Oh, wow.
So let me ask the first question. As Deputy Prime Minister, you have a wide-ranging portfolio, as well as being involved in the policies of the government in general. What are your and your government's goals to achieve in terms of equality for LGBTI people in Belgium?
Well, thank you for that question and for your introduction again. I'm happy to be here. I think it's fair to start with saying that equality, non-discrimination, human rights is a very transversal subject. That means it is in all our policies. It should be in all our policies. So if you say, what can you do for rights of LGBTI plus people? Well, in many policies, we have to pay attention to their needs as we do for other groups in society. As a deputy prime minister, I'm of course watching closely what the whole government is doing in that respect. We are going to reform the gender recognition law, for instance, to address specifically the situation for non-binary people. We have already a pretty good law for transgender people, for legal gender recognition, but it is not addressing specifically the non-binary people. We also want to work more on non-discrimination. We have an interfederal plan on sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics, which brings me to the rights of intersex people, which is also a group we will work on in this government, specifically on medically unnecessary surgeries on intersex people. You know that this is a hot topic. And then with the COVID crisis, we've addressed specifically the needs of LGBTI people for emergency housing and looking for additional funding there because some people flee their homes and need protection. We know that for women this is the case, for migrants this is the case, but also for LGBTI people. So this is really something we also want to address specifically. I think I could go on, but I
No,
will stop
don't.
here, Boris.
Because of course it's very interesting, but
Yeah.
unfortunately we have limited time, and I would like to
understand.
ask some other questions. So you were focusing now on Belgium, but when we broaden the scope to the European Union, we see countries like Hungary, for instance, where LGBTI rights are under attack, or Poland, or even the United Kingdom, of course not member of the EU anymore, but they have restrictive gender identity, gender recognition reforms going on. So let me ask you, how do you think European governments and of course legislators, like we members of the Global Equality Caucus are, how can we respond to these kind of challenges within Europe?
Well, it's a very important question, of course, because we can set certain standards within the European Union. We have, of course, the treaties and legal basis for that. And then, yet again, we see in certain member states that things are happening that go against that. So how to react to that? We have an LGBTI plus strategy, which is developed by the European Commission, which is actually a good strategy. And I will not go into all the details, but it is really working towards more inclusion, protection against discrimination, against hate crime, hate speech, which specifically targets LGBTI people. Recognition of parenthood. This is something close to my heart because, as you said, I'm a specialist in reproductive medicine. So lesbian couples, for instance, moving to other member states, what happens with the recognition of their marital status if they go to other member states. So this is extremely important. Of course, the competences are, on the other hand, also limited. Often it is a question of exchanging good practices and trying really to tackle the major things. I'm thinking of conversion therapies, for instance, which are still around and need to be banned. We all agree on that. So I believe that the EU, or I expect a lot from the new instrument for the protection of human rights that the EU is working on, which should address specifically also the situation of LGBTI people and where the EU can really make a difference. And in the Council now, I'm sure that we, as Belgian government, can make a difference.
Okay.
Your question, of course, on how to deal with member states. All the mechanisms that are in place to sanction or to cut the funding and so on. This is extremely difficult to start
Mhm.
with, and very controversial, of course. So this discussion, I think, is still ongoing, and the EU needs really to consider how they can really make sure that member states adhere to the common standards, or what the consequences will be. So I'm not willing to use very firm declarations, which are never a solution. I think negotiation, working with local groups. There is opposition in Hungary and in Poland. There is people that do not agree with their government positions sometimes. So I think negotiations, trying to work together, still in the long term, may be more productive than being sanctioning and
Yeah.
harsh and pushing member states out in that way. I wouldn't
Okay.
go that direction.
Well, if we move beyond Europe, what are your thoughts on LGBTI rights in the world? And can we in the global north learn something from the global south, or vice versa? How can we help bring about change?
Yeah, that's I would say even more difficult, probably, because it's already difficult within the EU. If you look at the UN level and in the rest of the world, LGBTI rights are still very controversial. In many countries, you can't even think about what we have achieved here in Europe. I think every time again we have to repeat that LGBTI rights are human rights, and that it's not okay to discriminate people because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, or etc. And we need to stand up for these rights in all the international fora that we have. For instance, at the level of the UN, we have specifically to address the needs of LGBTI people, I think, in asylum and migration, and have sensitivity for that, because this is a really very particular problem. And the right to asylum, we need to defend that and look at vulnerable groups, children, women, but LGBTI people that are often fleeing because of the fact that they are LGBTI, of course. I think Belgium has always taken up a role in favor of defense of human rights, of LGBTI rights, of women rights in international fora, and it will and it should continue to do so. Unfortunately, the EU doesn't speak with one voice anymore because of the different equilibria that have to be sought. But individual member states can still stand up and speak out.
Okay, thank you. We started with Belgium, then we moved to the EU, then we moved to the world, and now, of course, we go one step further. We come to Petra de Sutter herself. You are a role model. How can we encourage more trans people to become more involved in politics? What can you specifically do for them?
Yeah, well, it's a tricky question, because I haven't made it a secret that for me, my personal history is part of who I have become, but only a very small layer of my identity. We are all multi-layered, so I would never
Definitely.
want to be reduced to be that trans minister that people are talking about. I want to be judged for my ideas, my thoughts, and my deeds, whatever, and not who I am. I think that's a first thing I want to say. On the other hand,
Thank you.
of course, I get the question all the time, and in the media as well. So I'm willing to take the role of a role model of maybe somebody who can inspire others that are struggling with issues of sexual orientation, gender identity, and probably a lot of other issues as well, that people have to free themselves and to really get the energy then to have a full accomplished life. But my message would be, don't give up and believe in yourself. I mean, if you really want to achieve something, you work hard for it. You can do that. There is a lot of support. Look for it. Believe in yourself. I had the chance to meet the Dalai Lama 5 years ago in a personal meeting, and that is his slogan: "Never give up." This is something that we need to give people, and believe in yourself. You can get where you want if you really are good at it, you work hard, and you need a little luck, of course.
Thank you so much. That's very inspirational. My last question to you, and I ask you for a short answer, is, let's say 50 years from now, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, again, for what I've done as a politician, as a minister, what I'm doing now, I want to have more inclusive public service. I really want to move forward in a lot of domains and fight inequality and discrimination. That would be nice if people would remember that I was one of the people that have contributed, together with many, many others, of course.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time, but I would like to really thank you once again. It was wonderful talking to you, very inspirational. And I wish you the best of luck with your work and yourself in Belgium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Petra.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. We have reached the end of our event today, and I would like to thank everybody who joined and for their insightful contributions. Europe leads from the front on LGBT+ equality in many respects, but as we've heard, there are still many challenges to overcome. We must continue to work for LGBT+ people across the continent and raise issues in our parliaments, both nationally and in the European Union. I would also like to thank everyone who joined to watch this broadcast wherever you are in the world. The point of this event was not only to facilitate discussion between legislators and civil society, but also to connect with you, the public. Elected representatives may have a vote, but the public has a voice. Let's continue to work together for change. Thank you to the Global Equality Caucus for hosting this event with the support of Google. I've been Boris Dietrich. Good evening.